You're listening to the Art of Greatness podcast, episode number 23. Welcome to the Art of Greatness podcast. My name is June Allen, your sister in service from juneallen.net. On this show, I empower non-white listeners to prioritize their racial wellness and emotional sobriety. The platform is for educational purposes, is based on my experiences, and is shared in good faith. Always consult your doctor, therapist, or licensed mental health professional before applying any of the suggestions given within this platform. The vision is to build a blackalicious life of empowerment so there can be peace. Now on with the show. Hey, greetings family, greetings. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you spending time with me. Today, I really wanted to take the time just to share something personal with you today. And this may help somebody that you know that's struggling with addiction, or maybe you're struggling with addiction. Yesterday, which is the 6th of November, was the anniversary of my older brother's death, and his name is David. And after many years of using drugs and alcohol, his body just gave up, and he was very young. He was 46 years old. During the last sober conversation that I had with him, it was really nice actually. I mean, we talked about AA, we talked about recovery, and I remember him kind of laughing and sharing with me about how a lot of his friends who were addicts were in recovery, and they were always sharing with him how great it was and how much they got out of it, and they would they'd spent quite a lot of time trying to talk him into going to a meeting and getting sober. I also shared with him, my own experience of being in recovery and working with the sponsor, and how powerful that is as a way to understand yourself, understand your pain, understand and learn, new ways of coping with things that were painful, with things that were difficult. Despite having this conversation, I just knew that, he wasn't quite ready. Sometimes, unless people hit rock bottom, they're not ready to actually start doing the work. And this is the reason why, having a rock bottom is so important, because when you hit that bottom, the pain of that powerlessness is actually what's going to drive you into seeking help. It's going to drive you into the recovery rooms and start working those steps and sticking to it. Sometimes people are just not feeling enough pain in order to take that step. I'm just really glad that I had the opportunity to have that conversation with him and share that message, because it was important to be able to let him know that there was another way for him to manage his life, and that there was another way for him to manage his pain, and he didn't have to carry on the way that he was carrying on, because it wasn't working for him. And for a long time, I was afraid to answer my landline telephone, because I knew that one day it would ring and I would get the message that he was gone. And when that time finally arrived, I was absolutely devastated. I was really devastated. But at the same time, I also felt a sense of relief. A sense of relief that, he was finally free from the addictive cycle that he was in. He was free of whatever the emotional pain was that just kept him using, that just kept him numbing out, that just kept him abandoning himself. There is a misconception that many of us think that being addicted to something is just about alcohol and drugs, and that's just the way that pain manifests itself. It's actually about numbing pain. It's a coping mechanism that helps the addict deal with the overwhelm of their current reality. Being present is just too painful, so they have to escape. It's about trying to escape themselves. And for some people it manifests as drink and drugs, and for others it can be food, it can be shopping, it can be sugar, work, sex, gambling, and the list goes on. You can grow that list. It's also important to consider that addiction is not just about excess. It's also about compulsive behaviour. It's about compulsive avoidance and deprivation. So you can be addicted to poverty, you can be addicted to misery, you can compulsively avoid intimacy, joy, happiness. All of those things become so alien to people, especially when you've experienced a lot of pain in childhood and so on, that it becomes compulsive. And this is my story. Because of the pain that I experienced growing up, and also the pain of internalized racism, and many of the dysfunctional relationships that I've been in growing up, and as an adult as well, being addicted to relationships that are dysfunctional, that are abusive, that are the people were not available. These are all compulsive forms of behaviour that I was kind of addicted to, because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand my pain, and I just kept repeating this cycle of painful trauma. And I found it difficult to sit with myself. I found it very difficult to sit with myself. And so, my addiction is about compulsively avoiding people, compulsively avoiding relationships. And, my recovery is about learning how to self-parent, learning how to nourish myself, learning to accept and celebrate my blackness. In the beginning of my recovery journey, the pain of my blackness was so intense. I couldn't, I needed to go into the rooms to deal with the surface layers first, because, the blackness stuff was so deep and so painful that I just wasn't strong enough. I didn't have the tools to be able to deal with that stuff, and no one else in recovery wanted to talk about it. So I had to, I didn't know this consciously at the time, but when I was in recovery, in the early days, those rooms actually helped me deal with the surface layers, and then provided me with the tools to open my mind so that I could then begin to understand my black pain and then talk about my black experience. Living under the system of racism, white supremacy, means that you also will experience and carry pain at many different levels. How are you dealing with your pain? Just think about that for a minute. Do you even know that you're in pain? Are you aware of where the pain manifests itself? This is what it means to know thyself. Know thyself is not just about history. It's not just about learning about, ancient Africa and ancient Egypt and all of these fantastic things which are an important part of the puzzle. But do you know yourself as part of your humanity? Do you understand what your triggers are? Are you able to be vulnerable around who you are as a human being? When my brother died, I made a promise to him that I would continue to do this work no matter what. I didn't want his death to be something that I would just mourn every year and have regrets, and it to be a huge source of pain. Now when I think about him, it makes me want to continue to do this work even more. I made the commitment that I would continue to empower you, to empower yourself, to take care of yourself. I made the commitment that I would continue to share my journey of recovery through the Black experience. One of the most difficult things that I went through when I first went into recovery was not having anyone else to share my Black experience with. I didn't really understand how to articulate my feelings around racial wellness. I didn't understand because no one else was talking about it. So it's really important for me to keep sharing my recovery story for those that really want external solutions. So want internal solutions for the external problem of racism, white supremacy. There is a solution, and you don't have to live a life of pain and powerlessness. Black self-respect means that you can tell the truth about your pain. Black self-love is about being willing and being open to asking for help and not stopping until you get it. That's what I had to do in the early days. I just kept asking for help. I kept talking about this stuff even though it was hard and it was painful, and I would have to deal with a lot of shame that came up around asking for help, but I just kept going, and I'm still going. I'm still searching. I'm still looking for more tools. I'm still looking for ways that I can make this better, not just for myself but for my daughter, and then I can pass it on to you. If you're struggling with addiction and or you don't know if you're an addict, you don't really understand it, and you want to learn more about 12-step recovery, I'm going to put a link in the show notes with a previous podcast that I did about recovery for beginners, for people that want to understand what it's about. And you can have a look at some of the websites and stuff as well. There's some resources there where you can look and find out what different recovery fellowships there are. There are so many different recovery fellowships. I mean, the ones that I've named in this podcast are just a few, but there really are so many different ones, and it's all free. It's all free. So you can go to the websites, you can look at the characteristics, and most recovery fellowships have a list of characteristics, so you can identify with those characteristics or not. So yeah, just listen to the podcast and have a look at the show notes in the other podcast as well, and you'll find lots of links. Actually, you know what, I'll put the links in the bottom of this podcast, and you haven't got to be searching around for it. It's just going to be easy for you if I do that. Just be willing to listen and search for other ways that you can be well. Those recovery rooms, they gave me life in the early days when I had no one. I felt so lonely when I first started going to those meetings, but they kept me going. And ultimately those rooms have brought me full circle to be here talking to you today. And I'm so grateful. You just got to be open, be willing, be the change. Thank you for taking the time to spend your time with me today. I really appreciate it. I don't take it for granted. I know you're busy. So I really appreciate the time that you spend with me on these podcasts. If you've got any questions or anything else that you'd like to share, or about anything that I've mentioned in this podcast, then you can email me at info@yardofgreatness.com. Till next time, with Blackalicious love. See you next time. Greetings family, it's June. Let's get honest for a minute. Are you secretly struggling with low self-esteem? Is your negative thinking keeping you small? Would you like more confidence to share your black girl magic? I have 7 days of revolutionary black self-love. It's a free audio email course to show you some simple ways to love on your blackness. Go to www.blackselflove7.juneallen.net. Build your blackalicious life. Be empowered.